Hey all, here at OS Reviews. You're watching our hands-on review of the Winnovo Tabook 3. This is a 2-in-1 convertible that is a tablet and then becomes like a hybrid laptop when you connect the magnetic keyboard, which by the way is included in the box. Now the design here is obviously inspired by the Microsoft Surface tablets, and I think its closest competitor would be the Surface Go in terms of specifications and roughly the same price range. Now the Surface Go retails for $399 and it doesn't include the keyboard in the box, versus this one, which is $330, sometimes goes on sale for a little bit under and includes the keyboard. So we are talking about a cost difference of around $150 compared directly to Microsoft's entry-level Surface. In terms of specifications, they are quite similar. This one has an Intel Pentium N4200 processor. It's quad-core, clocked up to 2.5 gigahertz, and it's going to be a little bit faster in terms of benchmarks compared to some of the Intel Atom chips and some of the Celeron chips that you see. The magnetic keyboard is backlit, so you can turn on an LED light and see it when typing in the dark, a nice feature to have, and there's also a fingerprint scanner integrated into the trackpad. Otherwise, it has a 13.3-inch IPS LCD screen at full HD resolution, and it's going to be a widescreen aspect ratio or 16:9. So this is a rather large tablet if you're using it in the tablet form, just because most tablets are around 10 inches. Other Windows convertibles we've seen have been around 12 inches or 11.6 inches in the past, so this is going to be significantly wider. Parts of the specifications which are a little weaker would be the fact that it only has 4 gigabytes of RAM built on in. Would have really liked to see 6 gigabytes of RAM. Again, the price is a little cheaper than what Chewy and Zaidu offer. Both of these other brands from Shenzhen, China also have Surface-like designs on some of their products, but those typically sell for around $360. We have a 10,000 milliamp hour capacity battery that should last for around 7 to 8 hours of use before you need to recharge it again, and it also comes with Windows 10, actually S edition out of the box, which is the same version of Windows as you'll find on the Surface Go. The S stands for safe mode and optimizes battery life a little bit more, but if you want to revert to Windows 10 Home, all you need to do is click one button by opening up the Microsoft Store and it instantly becomes Windows 10 Home Edition for free by one click of a key depending on your needs. Aside from the tablet and keyboard, we have just the charger. What's notable here is by default, they include a proprietary prong, which is round, although this does also work with USB Type-C. So you can use a Type-C port to charge it, you can use it for file transfer, for HDMI, all of those purposes. And there's also a quick user manual and warranty card. Quick size comparison, again, this is a pretty large tablet. Here it is next to something like a original Surface, which has around a 10-inch display, so you can see that difference there. Similar to the Chewy Surbook Mini, which like the Surface Go has roughly a 10.5-inch screen size, so you can see again that difference. And if we have a laptop like the Jumper EasyBook, we can see that even the laptop is a little bit shorter from the side. So this is by no means going to be the most compact thing in the world, especially if you hold it. It is going to be a little on the hefty side, but that's why you have the kickstand, which can definitely help you pop it at an elevated angle. Just like the Surface Pro, you have unlimited angles that you can use to adjust it, and you can tilt it back at virtually any angle. It's pretty stiff and feels quite comfortable. You can lay it to a very far extent if you're standing up and looking down at it, for example. There's also an SSD extension slot, so if the 64 gigs of built-in storage is not sufficient, what's interesting here is you can upgrade this, which is pretty rare to see on tablets. Now, the entire body of the tablet is constructed out of aluminum alloy, so it does feel extremely premium. Just a small plastic strip on the top, which acts as the antenna for the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Very top features a micro SD card slot. There is a power key and volume controls. Both are pretty tactile. On the right-hand spine, you find access to a 3.5mm headphone jack, full-size USB Type-C port, and then on the other edge, we have access to a second USB 3.0 full-size port, USB-C port. There is the proprietary charging port, or again, you can use the Type-C, and there's also a mini HDMI port for video out. The included keyboard is very similar to the Surface, has a soft touch felt material on the outside, and it is magnetic, so whenever you close it, it locks into place and also turns off the screen. And whenever we lift up the flap, it also wakes up the screen as well. So the process works quite well, it's pretty seamless. Now, by the way, the OVO, which is stamped on the back of the kickstand, actually stands for the last 3 letters of Winnovo. So if we look at it, that's kind of their logo, and that's what the imprint is. Now, this tablet doesn't have a rear-facing camera, camera, so that's one thing to keep in mind. But it does have a webcam, which is rated at 2 megapixels, can capture HD content for things like Skype and video chatting. Examining the keyboard in more depth, again, it really is similar to just the Surface. You can actually unhinge it like this to lay it completely flat, and it kind of docks onto the bottom bezel here magnetically to give you an elevated angle when you're typing. So this is the degree of elevation if we were looking at it from the side. Keys themselves are a traditional island or chiclet style layout, and they have a decent depth of travel to them. They feel quite responsive. I really had no issues. It is a full-size keyboard because of how widescreen the tablet is. It's a pretty comfortable canvas to use. Now, in order to activate the backlight, if we dim the studio lighting here, we can tap on the function and the escape key to actually activate it. So this is the default mode. It is going to be quite dim. So if you are in perhaps on an airplane, you can still type comfortably. And then one more for the second mode, it gets a little bit brighter. And a nice feature to have that many of the other Surface-like clones are lacking currently. Now down below here we have the touchpad and the aforementioned fingerprint scanner, which is super fast and responsive. You can just tap on it and basically the laptop unlocks. So we are talking about a pretty solid overall keyboard experience. And if you don't want to use the keyboard, you can also undock it. It's magnetic, held into place using Togo contact points, and you can also switch into the Surf tablet mode automatically. So it becomes easier to interact with using just touch and your fingers, kind of like Windows 8 Metro back in the day. But whenever you dock it back onto the keyboard, it'll alert you to switch into the desktop classic mode by default. Now this is actually the dimmest that the display gets, so it's reasonably dim even if you're in a darker space, and then in the maximum brightness it does get good enough even to use outdoors when there's a little bit of light, sunlight around you. With pretty wide and generous viewing angles, that still looks quite good, overall decent color reproduction, and also pleasant enough sharpness. In terms of going into the system properties, we can see that a significant portion, over 25 gigs, is occupied by the operating system of Windows 10, so we get a little bit over 30 gigs remaining for you to store content with, which is not a huge amount. But if you supplement it using a hard drive with cloud storage and you're installing lighter titles and apps on it, it should still be fine. The Tabook also has built-in stereo speakers, which are front-facing, one on the left, one on the right, pretty similar to what Chewy and Xidu's models offer, which is nice to see. Because this is an Intel Pentium chip, we can actually select the overall consumption mode of performance that we desire. For example, if we're in the battery saving mode, to juice out longer usage versus the best performance mode, which will run the CPU at its maximum clock speed of 2.5 gigahertz, but it's also going to degrade the battery life, as you can see there, by roughly 1 hour. But overall, battery performance is actually slightly above average. One final distinction in terms of the hardware is those two other units that I just mentioned do have support for an active stylus similar to the Surface. So if you are a graphic artist, that is one feature that is currently missing on the Tabook. You can still supplement it with your own stylus pen, but it's not going to support pressure sensitivity unless you connect it to a Wacom board or something like that. When it comes to raw benchmark performance, again, we do have a Pentium N4200, which has a CPU mark of above 2000. We're still not talking about flying performance. It's not going to be a gaming machine. It's not going to be a Core M or an i series, but for a low-powered processor that consumes less than 4 watts of power, it actually does decent. Now, compared to some of the competitors, like the Celeron N3450, which is found in the Chewy Surbook, and also the Intel Atom E3950, which is found in the Xidu Philbook, you can see that the performance here is actually a little bit higher than those. So with those other processors used, the common Atom chips are going to be below 1,800, so about 200 points lower in terms of raw benchmark, while consuming more power as well. So overall, I think that this is slightly advantageous, considering it's also cheaper than the other models. Now, if we jump into how it does in terms of web browsing, we are using Chrome, by the way, which is not the most energy efficient browser, but I find it to be one of the faster experiences, especially if you're watching YouTube, for instance. But if we want to jump into something like the Verge for now, we can type this out, and you can see that overall it loads back pretty quickly as expected. Having that 5G band is great. It ensures pretty fast connectivity, and I never really was in an area where I couldn't get around 3 to 4 bars of signal. It ensures that the overall page load up times are relatively snappy and quick. It's not instantaneous, again, like an Intel i series chip maybe would have, but you can see here that scrolling is still relatively smooth, even on a complex page like The Verge. The screen itself is pretty responsive. It supports up to 10 fingers for multi-touch without any real problems. The touchpad can press down whenever you click on it, and overall scrolling is also quite fast and responsive if we're using it. And it does also support multi-touch for things like pinch to zoom, as you can see there, even a little bit smoother than using the touchscreen. It's actually a decent trackpad. Speaking of YouTube, we can load back clips pretty quickly. Videos load up to full HD resolution with no real stuttering or issues. Everything is still quite smooth. Now, of course, going beyond full HD is a little bit overkill since the panel only produces 1080p resolution, unless you are connected to a 4K monitor. But in tablet mode, up to full HD, again, handles without any issues. Really is a great screen here for watching back media because of how wide it is. Overall, I'd say they can definitely get a little bit louder. If you're in a smaller room or listening to content by yourself, it more than suffices. At least it is front-facing. But overall, it's a decent sounding set of speakers. It doesn't really distort, and at least it is a stereo set of speakers, so you get some pretty good immersion and separation. You can feel objects moving across the screen, which makes it pretty cinematic for watching back videos with. So we're going to do a Google kind of sample PowerPoint here. We can full screen it, connect it to a monitor using HDMI or Type-C, and you can see everything is loading along really without any problems. Pretty fast and responsive. We can tap along to control things. It's really without any problems for students and for light business use, as you can see here. Now we can also jump over to, say, a demo of a Excel document. It also can handle really without too many issues. Now we can also jump into something like, for example, coding. If you're doing some very light coding work, you can use any environment compared to, say, Chrome OS, which is still a bit more restricted to things like getting coding work done. And for these basic uses, everything is still functional. You can definitely get some work done on here really without too many problems. Of course, the same goes for the case of editing documents, which is going to be even more common of a use case, I think, for most students. 13.3 inches is quite a comfortable size as a laptop or an ultra portable. It's quite standard these days. Only slight con here is just like the Surface, this works best if you put it onto a flat surface like a desk, because the kickstand can still be a little awkward if you're balancing it on your lap and you're in a moving object like a car, because in the end of the day, this is still a soft surface. So just a profile view of the extreme angle from the side, and we can also lay the keyboard flat like so. In terms of gaming, yes, it does run Minecraft, and for lighter titles, you can try them out and they should still work. And there's also some cloud-based gaming services these days, which kind of sideloads the overall gaming experience to the cloud. For example, some of Google's options that makes it possible to even game on lower end hardware like this. But if you're trying to run some really demanding titles, this is still not going to be the machine for you. At the end of the day, it's still a very energy efficient chip and relatively entry level chip as well. So I wouldn't really use it for specifically gaming, but for some really light usage, it does okay. It's a slight step up compared to the really bottom of the line Atom chips that we've seen in the past. These super light games you will have no real problems with, especially ones that you can find from the Microsoft Store, kind of like mobile-like titles. It will still handle really without any problems, and you get that nice touchscreen experience, which is going to be nice and comfortable that you can use for interacting with some games and on-screen controls, especially if you're in the tablet mode. So that's more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the Winnovo Tabook 3. By no means is this the most powerful machine in the world. It still is relatively entry-level, but it's meant for kind of casual use, maybe a student, someone that doesn't need to do a whole lot, but wants a good enough build quality, a nice display, and also has a nice array of I/O, like full-size USB 3.0 ports, which are on the tablet, and you don't need to dock it to access them. Really is a nice, I think, competitor to the Surface Go at a cheaper price, again, around $150 cheaper, but at the same time having a slightly larger screen, which for the Surface Go, 10.6 inches is a little bit too small for some folks to get full-time productivity done. So I think this is going to be a slight upgrade in those departments. compartments. As long as your use cases are moderate and you also want a machine that has full windows on it, it's a pretty nice choice if you want a Surface-like design. You don't want to spend quite as much money, but it's equally as solid in terms of the build and giving us a good enough experience. I think that for casual use, this is not a bad choice at all. You can check out more details if you are interested in the links down below, but for now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the Winnovo Tabook Surface-style laptop.